April 1948. Jerusalem was supposed to be neutral. A city too sacred to destroy, but within weeks it was starving, divided, and under siege not by accident but by design. On this channel we examine the moments when history did not simply unfold, it was forced into a new shape by pressure, decisions and systems that left no easy choices behind. The battle for Jerusalem was never just about controlling a city, it was about whether a newborn state could survive without its symbolic heart, and whether its enemies could destroy that state without ever conquering it directly. Why didn't Jerusalem fall completely in 1948, and why did neither side truly win it? In November 1947, the United Nations proposed partitioning British-ruled Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab. Jerusalem, however, would not belong to either. It would become an international city. On paper, it looked like a compromise. In reality, it satisfied no one. Jewish leaders accepted the plan because it meant legal statehood. Arab leaders rejected it because it meant permanent loss of land they considered theirs. Violence began almost immediately. By early 1948, the British Empire was withdrawing. Their departure created a vacuum, and vacuums in contested lands rarely stay empty. Jerusalem became the most dangerous vacuum of all. The city's Jewish population, roughly 100,000 people, was geographically isolated. The road connecting them to the coastal plain and the Jewish population centers near Tel Aviv passed through hostile territory. Arab irregular forces quickly targeted this lifeline. Convoys carrying food, water and medicine were ambushed, trucks burned, drivers killed, supplies captured. This was not a dramatic battle, it was something quieter and far more lethal. Siege. Meanwhile, the Jewish Defense Force, the Haganah, was still transforming from an underground militia into a conventional army. They had limited heavy weapons, almost no armor, and shortages of trained personnel. Inside the city, panic grew slowly. Bread was rationed. Water was restricted. Hospitals prepared for shortages they knew were coming. Outside the city, Arab fighters did not need to storm Jerusalem to defeat it. They only needed to close the road. But the Arab side was not a single unified force. It was a patchwork of local militias, volunteers, and eventually regular armies from neighboring states, each with different goals. The most disciplined of these forces belonged to Transjordan, commanded by British-trained officers and loyal to King Abdullah I, their elite formation. The Arab Legion was not interested in chaotic guerrilla warfare. It wanted strategic control, especially of the old city and the high ground surrounding Jerusalem, because whoever controlled the hills controlled the city. By April 1948, the situation had reached a breaking point. Jerusalem's Jewish districts had only weeks of supplies left. If the road remained closed, starvation, not combat, would decide the outcome. Jewish leadership faced an impossible choice: attempt large-scale offensive operations with an underprepared force, or watch the city collapse slowly. David Ben-Gurion chose action. Operation Action was launched, the first major offensive of the war by Jewish forces. Its objective was simple but brutal: open the road to Jerusalem by force. Villages overlooking the highway were attacked and cleared. Convoys were pushed through under heavy guard. Some succeeded, many did not, but the operation proved something critical. Jerusalem could still be supplied if enough risk was accepted. Then came the moment that changed the character of the conflict. On April 9, 1948, fighters from the Irgun and Lehi attacked the village of Deir Yassin, near Jerusalem. The massacre of civilians that followed shocked the region and intensified fear on both sides. For Arab communities, it became proof that survival required total resistance. For Jewish communities, it hardened the belief that defeat meant annihilation. From this point forward, compromise became nearly impossible. Violence escalated, retaliation followed retaliation. The siege tightened again. When neighboring Arab states formally entered the war in May 1948, the character of the battle shifted from civil war to interstate conflict. The Arab Legion moved toward Jerusalem with clear objectives: secure the old city and cut Jewish control of the western sectors permanently. They were disciplined, well-trained, and supported by artillery, something the Jewish forces largely lacked. The fighting inside the city became brutal and methodical, street by street, building by building. In the ancient walled district known as the Old City of Jerusalem, Jewish defenders were isolated, outnumbered, and running out of ammunition. Appeals for reinforcement could not be answered. The surrounding territory was already in Arab Legion hands. After days of intense fighting, the Jewish quarter surrendered. For the first time in centuries, Jews no longer controlled any part of the old city. But outside the walls, the battle was not over. In West Jerusalem, Jewish forces held their ground. Improvised barricades, fortified buildings, and sniper positions turned neighborhoods into defensive grids. The problem was still supply. Every loaf of bread, every box of ammunition, every drop of fuel had to come through the road, and the road passed through a strategic choke point known as withdrew. The Arab Legion fortified it heavily. Multiple Israeli assaults failed, casualties mounted, the position held. At this point, a purely military solution looked impossible, so planners turned to something less dramatic: engineering. Under constant threat, crews began constructing a rough bypass route through the hills. It was steep, primitive, and barely suitable for vehicles, but it worked. This improvised supply line, later known as the Burma Road, allowed trucks to reach Jerusalem without passing through Latrone, not safely, not efficiently, but enough to keep the city alive. This was not a battlefield victory. It was logistical survival. By late 1948, the city had effectively split into two armed camps. Israeli forces controlled the western sectors, Jordanian forces controlled the eastern sectors, including the Old City. Neither side had the strength or international freedom to eliminate the other completely. Armistice lines hardened into borders. Barbed wire, concrete barriers, and sniper zones cut through neighborhoods. Streets ended abruptly at walls. Families were separated by a few hundred meters that might as well have been continents. Jerusalem did not fall, but it did not remain whole either. The battle's outcome was not decisive victory. It was permanent division. The consequences extended far beyond 1948. Jerusalem became a symbol not just of faith, but of unresolved conflict. Control of the city influenced diplomacy, military planning, and regional politics for decades. The division established patterns that would shape future wars, including the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel captured East Jerusalem and the Old City. But the roots of that later conflict lie in 1948 in the siege, the improvisation, and the realization that symbolic cities can be strategically fragile. The battle also demonstrated something deeper about modern warfare. Cities are not defeated only by armies, they are defeated by isolation. Food, water, roads, and morale can matter more than territory. Jerusalem survived in 1948 not because it was unconquerable, but because one side found a way to supply it just enough to endure. Survival, not dominance, decided the outcome. Today, Jerusalem remains one of the most contested cities on earth, not because of a single battle, but because of what that battle left unfinished. In 1948, no one truly captured Jerusalem. They only learned how hard it is to control a city that the world refuses to treat as ordinary. If there is another moment in history you want explored with this level of depth and clarity, let me know in the comments. And if you value calm, serious storytelling that looks beyond headlines and hero myths, consider subscribing, because the most important turning points in history are rarely the loudest ones. They are the ones that quietly decide what the future will allow.